One second. Sounds good. Uh,
It is up and running.
Thank you very much. I am running for U.S. Senate in New York against Chuck Schumer, who has been in Washington for a total of 42 years. I am a LaRouche independent candidate. In the state of New York, they don't have such a thing as unaffiliated. You have to establish a quote unquote independent body. So that's what mine is. I have been a political organizer for about 34 years, working with Lyndon LaRouche, who passed away in 2019. I am a trained classical musician, trombonist, and choir director. And I think that we have a great civilizational crisis, which is going to require something other than piecemeal solutions.
All right, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Miss Darren. It's been one. It's been I've been on the trail for a long time. I've been on the streets, and I know you're here in New York, and I've seen so much of your work. You've been standing on so many of the issues on the right side of them, and I appreciate you. Now we have up next Eric. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Mulder. I am the Libertarian nominee running for the U.S. House of Representatives, Colorado's 6th congressional district, which covers the cities of Aurora, Centennial, and Littleton. I was the Libertarian nominee for sheriff of Arapahoe County in 2018 and ran on a platform of demilitarizing the sheriff's department, withdrawing from the 1033 military weapons lending program that gives military grade weapons to local law enforcement. And I was also the only candidate who opposed the expansion of the Arapahoe County Jail with a variety of criminal justice organizations, and was the only sheriff running in Colorado in 2018, only sheriff candidate in Colorado in 2018, running on a platform of supporting the decriminalization of psilocybin, the component found in magic mushrooms. I'm looking forward to this criminal justice discussion because I've had a long history of being active in criminal justice in the state of Colorado and Arapahoe County.
Wow. If I had known more about that, then I would have made you a feature panelist like our next one. But I'm actually quite excited to have you on board. The Libertarians are the number one third party in the United States for a long time. And I'm actually a big fan, working with Libertarians here in New York State, including Jonathan Howe and Larry Sharp. I want to shout them out right quick. And the Libertarians, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Now, the next panelist also has criminal background experience. She's actually a featured panelist of the show due to her experience on this particular topic. Miss Michelle Lewis, if you could introduce yourself, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lewis, an affiliated candidate for United States Senate here in North Carolina. And I'm a former law enforcement officer. But I'm actually running on a platform of comprehensive criminal justice reform. Since criminal justice reform has been really important to me since before I left law enforcement and in the time since I left, I am an activist and a pastor and a teacher. In my free time, I grow food for families in need through an organization called the Peace Garden Project. That's a nonprofit that I founded. I spent some time working at the United Nations where I worked on climate and also did some work in the Middle East where I worked on conflict resolution. So I'm just really glad to be here today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
big shout out to my fellow YouTube producer. I think her name is Andrea or something, Andrea Wachowski, something like that. She's actually given you she's said that your work in North Carolina is fantastic, so it's nice to hear from other people on the ground that are recognizing your work out there, and I'm really excited to hear from a lot of people want to do criminal justice reform. They've never actually even been a security guard, right? They have no idea what's going on. We're actually going to bring up another candidate in a moment, right, at the end, right, who's actually also a super featured person for this particular talk because of his position. But before I go to him, right, I'm going to introduce actually one of our most probably highly anticipated candidates, a former presidential candidate for the Green Party and now running Republican. You'd never have guessed it, right? Go ahead, Susan. Why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Susan Buxer-Lahaki. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives for West Virginia's 2nd District, and I'm running as a Republican this time. 2 years ago, I ran as a presidential candidate with the Green Party, and then I eventually did not get the nomination. But it was the 100-year anniversary of women's rights to vote, so I decided, since so many women had dropped out of the race or didn't try, I continued as a write-in in several states and continued my journey around the country to inform people about the 100-year anniversary, to continue celebrating women's rights and bring awareness to different things about the fact that we've forgotten to take care of mothers and other issues pertaining to women. And so, yeah, so I continued to run. Naturally, I'm not in the White House, so I didn't win, but I had just spent the last 20 plus years in Switzerland, and I was planning on returning to the U.S. And now I am fully here. I'm a resident of Morgantown, West Virginia, and I'm back into the politics. I'm still trying to help women. I'm gonna hopefully help women here and in West Virginia, but also around the country. So being a mother is an important job. Being a parent is a super important job. And right now, we're doing it as a hobby, and this is not acceptable. It should be some of it, somebody needs to stay home and raise kids. We've seen the results of doing it as a hobby, and this needs to change. So anyway, that's now I'm with the Republicans because you can't get really heard as a Green Party member or as a write-in. And so if you want people to notice you, it really helps to be in one of the big parties.
That's and thank you so much for your long. Well, actually, this whole panel has a long history of activism in different formats. So, thank you so much. And actually, we have a veteran right here, Randy. I'd like you to introduce yourself. I'm quite excited to have you on board, all the way from Alaska. Go ahead. Why don't you tell people what's going on?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Randy Perham, born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, and did 22 years in the Army as a chemical operations specialist, or CBRN for those that may be familiar. And just retired in 2020, September 2020, and I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives for the great state in the last frontier, Alaska, at large. So it's the whole entire state, not a singular congressional district. It's for the entire state. Small population, but the largest state in the union. So, it's a lot of ground to cover and everything else there. But in terms of being part of this criminal justice reform panel, I just wanted to say, I'm honored and privileged to be here today amongst some very highly esteemed colleagues here that are also running to look to change the reform the criminal justice system. So I'm looking forward to the engaging discussions and everything else. And that's all I have.
All right, the next candidate is actually, wow. It's just he's really like definitely a highlight here. But before I bring him up, I'm actually going to mention another candidate who actually wasn't able to attend right now. Her name is Barbara Gaskins. And one thing that I'm really excited about bringing on, besides just candidates who are here, sometimes they're like executives who've never like really experienced poverty, never experienced the prison system from the other side. And if you ask the managers and the executives how's things going, they'll always say things are going great. They'll always say, right, it's not my fault, yeah? So we need to hear from the victims of these systemic institutions that are causing problems as well. I'm happy that we had our last New York City criminal justice reform panel. We had a former candidate who was actually a former inmate, and This next candidate, well, Barbara Gaskins actually helps people with re-entry programs, and I'm actually work deeply with the homeless. So the people out of prison, they always end up homeless a lot. That I'm very close to that community. So this next candidate is just such an amazing story. I'm so glad he's here today. Go ahead, why don't you introduce yourself? Linwood? I think he's a little on delay.
Thank you for those kind words in your introduction. Thank you, sir. And yes, also you mentioned Barbara. I'm here also supporting Ms. Gaskins for her run for the U.S. House District 3 here out of North Carolina. I'm Linwood Gallup, and I'm running for a commissioner seat, Pasquotank County in North Carolina. I was formerly incarcerated for a crime I did not commit in 1989, armed robbery. I was sentenced to 14 years, mandatory 7. Ever since then, just about ever since I've been out, I've been very active in these issues concerning my community, and issue that also myself and the wonderful Miss Lewis, Michelle, participated in last year over the unlawful shooting that we felt behind Andrew Brown that took place here in Elizabeth City last year. So I'm very glad to be here, guys. Thank you all.
Well, I'm really glad that you're here. We really need to hear your perspective. Otherwise, I don't think that it would really be anything even close to like what should be going on here. So thank you so much for your participation, sir. Now, so the thing that I'm going to bring up now is, let me see. So we actually have a number of proposals, right? This is called the Unified Platform for 22. The idea is that on July 4th, we're going to have like a list of proposals, and we're going to bring them up for ratification. And a majority of the, if the majority of the independent candidates vote for a certain platform, then we could actually take on the corporate enterprises that give us a lot of problems. And honestly, people aren't really against the Democrats or Republicans per se. They're against the corruption and the unfairness that's rampant in our system. So we really need candidates we can believe in, and honestly, independent third parties can force certain issues that party leaders may try to interfere with, right? So the first one that, one of the proposals that we have that I want to bring up is Michelle Lewis actually introduced the idea of ending qualified immunity. Yeah? Is there any arguments against qualified immunity, or do we think that we have a pretty easy thing that could pass here? Does anybody know what qualified immunity is? Excellent. Okay. Now, do anybody else here has any proposal they might write? I could read some of the proposals that have been recommended. I could recommend one. I could talk about one that I think is a little bit more controversial, that might need support. But do any of you have proposals that you would like to recommend? Right, because this is really to help you shine as well. Right. So, do any of you have particular proposals you want to put in front of the candidates?
I would just be interested in hearing why Ms. Lewis is promoting. I have many reasons myself for this, but I'm sure you have specific thoughts in mind why you brought this up as something important, and I'd really like to hear how you would motivate it.
All right, Michelle, sounds great. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was a federal law enforcement officer, and I think people outside of law enforcement have this idea that, oh, well, law enforcement will essentially police themselves. And what I saw regularly is that doesn't happen. Sometimes the question is asked, well, if you're a law enforcement officer and you see a law enforcement officer doing the wrong thing, why can't you just tell them to stop? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And there's a story that I tell, and I apologize for those of you who've heard it before, is that when I was one of my duty stations, I actually was just there on a detail assignment, so I wasn't even fully working there. And we had worked a day shift and had gone back to work a night shift. And the officer that I was working with in this area said, hey, you want to have some fun tonight? And I was like, I don't know. Sure. I don't know what fun is, but all right, whatever. Right. And his idea of fun that night was him going around the city of Atlanta, waking up homeless people with an M16 pointed at their heads. And this isn't something someone told me. This is something that I saw. And I reported him the next day. I went to his chief And I said, hey, chief, you need to know about this thing that happened last night. And his chief just laughed and said, oh, well, I'll tell him not to pull out. They were actually AR-15s. He said, oh, well, I'll tell him, not to pull out the AR-15s unless I give him prior permission. And that was it. And so when I talk about ending qualified immunity, right, there's got to be a system in place so that law enforcement officers behaving badly we're actually able to get those people off the streets, knowing that sometimes the bad behavior is perpetuated by chiefs of police. Sometimes in this same area, I had an assistant United States attorney tell me to just beat people up because she didn't want us bringing cases before to her that she then had to take before the court. And so we just got into a regular pattern of calling to see which AUSA was on duty, because if that was the AUSA on duty, we didn't arrest anybody because we all knew that her preference was for us to beat people up. And it's not something that I saw in just one location. This is something that I saw regularly during the 7 years that I was a federal law enforcement officer. And so without a system in place to actually remove bad officers, because the system gives all officers the benefit of the doubt as long as they can articulate their behavior. And we know qualified immunity is not just for law enforcement officers, right? It's for public officials or people acting within the scope of their government duties. It's been extended to teachers even. But there's got to be a way. The public has to have some recourse. And, the argument that's made in favor of qualified immunity is it says, we need a system that holds public officials accountable, right, when they exercise their power irresponsibly, but we also need to keep them from just people who just have a vendetta, right? People who just want to come after law enforcement. And so I say it's possible to be pro-police and anti-police brutality. And it's sad that people don't see those things as being, two things that you can hold in tension, because you can hold those things in tension, but it does come with a certain amount of intentionality. So that's one of the reasons I actively advocate for, when I talk about comprehensive criminal justice reform, removing qualified immunity, ending qualified immunity is one of those things that I talk about.
Appreciate that. Yeah. All right. So, that's pretty deep right there. Are there any other proposals that I could actually talk about some of the proposals that are on this document here, such as big shout out just for a second to Gilberto Gonzalez, who is participating and commenting on the document. The comments open for public, but really we are really putting the candidates, right, are the ones who can make the proposals, because we're really hoping that that's the by the way, my co-host Lisa from who's my co-host for a long time from Los Angeles, and by the way also a member of Color of Change, she's here. Super excited. She's been on break working on her academic program, but this is exciting. So great to see you, Lisa. Yeah. All right, so
nice to be here.
Yeah. All right. Okay, here we go. All right, so the thing is that Gilberto Gonzalez pointed out that nonviolent offenders, it costs between $8,000 to $100,000 to keep someone in prison. That sounds like he wants to suggest training police to de-escalate or training police to intervene. So he wants to have some type of retraining. Also, he recommends enacting second look legislation to allow sentence reviews after 10 years. How do y'all feel about that?
I'm sorry, could you state the last part again?
Enact second look legislation to allow sentence reviews after 10 years. Actually, Prison Policy Reform Group has actually recommended second look sentencing immediately. That means, like, when they go through the law process, they can have like a second opinion. You could say that it's going to cost a lot more, but in the interests of justice, how do you feel about? There might be some objections to that, right? But thank you, Gilbert Gonzalez. We want other people to also contribute, and Gilberto Gonzalez. Thank you for participating. Right. Also, my man Brian from Phoenix Congress also had several recommendations as well. But how do you feel about the recommendation?
I'd like to go ahead and answer that if I could.
Go ahead.
All right. So I think, like as you initially brought up, some might be concerned about the additional costs of this process. But one of the other things to keep in mind when discussing these things is recidivism, the rate in which people are released and end up back into the prison system because of varying factors such as being set up to fail when they're released, don't have a good safety net to go back to when they get out. And the problem with recidivism is that it perpetuates this vicious cycle of people coming in and out of the prison system, and the effects on people and their families who get incarcerated is just absolutely devastating. So the more we can mitigate those risk factors up front, I would say the better, because even though it's a slightly bigger cost, long term it's going to be saving, because recidivism costs even more than just the initial process.
I'd like to weigh in on that as well. I think that doing it after the fact is far too late. So what we need to do is interfere when, whatever you want to call this person, the perpetrator or whatever, is caught. That's when the interventions need to happen, not after this whole expensive process of going through this so-called justice system, which is basically just trying to cajole people into taking a plea bargain, because that's what 95% of the cases are. There's people being forced to say guilty, even when they're not, of certain things. So they'll give them an outrageously high charge for something. If something's a wobbler, they'll give them the felony charge as opposed to a misdemeanor or whatever, in order for them to take a lower charge. But then it comes on the books as something, as a feather in the cap of whatever DA, and it does nothing for society as a whole. They'll get either a small sentence or something. But what you've done societally is hobble that person to never be able to actually go further in their education, in licensing, in job creation, in getting housing. So what you're doing is you're chewing up all these people through the maw and basically gutting an enormous part of the population without any ability to kind of expunge that. I mean, we're just going through a process right now where Gaskins is, we got rid of a black woman, the first black woman DA, Jackie Lacey, for Gaskins, and George Gaskins, and what he's doing is not making people jump through all these hoops to get to expunge and get rid of these marijuana convictions. He is going and doing it and expunging it for them without them having to jump all these hoops and all these processes and pay money and stuff. He's doing that. 600,000 convictions. I mean, can you think of how many people can't get jobs because of all of that? And now, all of a sudden, now we have all this workforce that is now available to us.
That sounds like a great proposal right there. Does anybody want to propose something like about this
is
particular
just
issue right here?
He's doing. And this is just one thing. This is just, if he only does this, it was worth getting him elected.
So a proposal that might solve this is something like, we want to get rid of all, like, if there's marijuana convictions and marijuana is legalized, we just pardon all those retroactive pardons?
To answer that question, why don't, instead of
drug convictions?
And there are things that we can do now before these things even happen to open up things with people. Crimes of poverty, like shoplifting crimes. I met a girl, 19 years old, pregnant, stole $7 worth, $7 of mascara from whatever.
That's Barbara Gaskins' story.
Something.
Right, Linwood?
If the mascara is worth that much, why don't you keep it under glass or behind the counter? What onus are we putting on the businesses? What we're doing is we're privatizing the profits and socializing the losses. And we have to stop doing that. We have to say, you know what, if it's so expensive for you, to have $7, stolen from you, and it costs the taxpayers 50, 60, if she's pregnant, for sure, $80,000 to $120,000 a year.
It sounds almost like incentivizing criminal behavior. Well, when you put it in that regards, because when somebody is stealing something, although it could be 2 cents, and you say they shouldn't be punished for that because of whatever personal situation they may be in, that just incentivizes them to say, oh, well, I'm not gonna get in trouble for this, so I'm gonna go on to something bigger and better. And they keep doing this until, there's something catastrophic happens to that person, because somebody somewhere along those lines will not tolerate that behavior and take them out. You know, so
Randy,
that's the
Randy-
thing that we this goes back. It goes back, not to cut you off. Sorry, but
Yeah,
it goes back to home training. You know, we have to have parental accountability and responsibility in the home to teach our children, you know, however old they may be, you know, not to get into these kind of activities because of the results and the consequences that come with it.
Is it incentivizing bad behavior to tell people to lock their doors, their car doors?
You know what? We're not here to
If
like.
I- if-
wait a minute. Yeah, we're not really
Are
here
we-
to.
is it- is-
We're not
is
really
that
here to have arguments on what's right or wrong.
No,
We're
I'm
really-
not saying. No,
we're just
no,
here
I'm
to see
not.
what we can
I'm
agree
not.
on.
I'm
My
just
bad,
saying
okay.
that we are privatizing the profits and socializing the losses. Are we not taking up are we not spending $50,000 to $120,000 on incarcerating a pregnant 19-year-old?
Okay.
Are we not?
We are.
So, okay.
So for me, yeah,
So who is being punished? Who's being punished? I see it as society and the taxpayer. And at the beginning of her working life, you're hobbling this young woman.
right. We need to help our young people at an earlier age. We need to start with creating a better quality citizen right from the start. And that starts with having mothers stay at home and getting paid for that important job. It also doesn't have to be specifically a woman. The person staying at home can also be a man. And it doesn't have to be the traditional family, male, female. It can be two men or two women who somebody is the stay-at-home person and somebody is the one who only, plays the daddy role. But you need the love and you need the home life. So that's for me number one in helping our children and the next generations come up and have a good start. Because right now we've seen what doing this as a hobby has done. We've got so many moms and dads working 2 and 3 jobs. They don't have time to parent when they come home. They're exhausted.
Actually, I didn't get really a chance to really introduce Lisa properly. The thing is that, right, like, honestly, right, I do a lot of work with the third parties and stuff like that, right? Libertarians, hey, good props to you, 200, right, maybe 200,000 members. You guys are doing your thing, 200 seats in Pennsylvania, props to you. But by the way, okay, Lisa, okay, has been working with this group called Color of Change. They have 8 million members, okay? 8 million, okay? So Lisa's been doing incredible work out there. If you really want to talk to an audience, right, Lisa is doing incredible work out there in LA. I'm a huge fan. Just wanted to really, I know she just kind of jumped in, so I just want you to know this is Lisa, my co-host. Yeah?
Sorry.
There you go. All right.
Well, I would like to say something on this question. And I don't think there is a legislative cure, which is we have a major cultural problem, which is that we have an idea of revenge or punishment as opposed to justice. And you can take the situation right now in Afghanistan, and it comes from the top, where we couldn't defeat 65,000 Taliban fighters. So in revenge, we have frozen their bank accounts, and there are now 23 million people about to die of starvation, and 13,000 newborn babies have died in that country since January. But somehow we look the other way, or there's like this rage factor. We couldn't get them, so we're going to crush them. That is so anti-Christian. Not that anyone has to be a Christian, or you can say anti-human, because it is the nature of human beings that you can change, that you have free will to become a better person. So you would think a society would actually want to create the conditions where people making that change for the better was what was valued, as opposed to that self-righteous feeling of revenge. And I think that carries all the way down. That is not to say, because then you do have the other problem, like we see in New York City, where they had so-called bail reform, which I think we obviously needed, because it means the billionaires get out of people and poor people sit in prison for years and they haven't even had a trial. But so there are crimes, where people do need to serve time, or they do need to be taken out of their ability to harm the public anymore. You can't have this rotating door where people are in and out and able to just go commit crimes. Which brings me to another point, which I think also has to do with this punishment mentality, which is mental health. Because how do you deal with people who are irrational because they have mental problems? And that we tend to penalize. We make judgments that people are bad as opposed to them getting the care that they require. And I was just looking, in the state of New York in 1955, there were 93,925 state hospital psychiatric beds. Now there's only 2,700. Now you could say, oh, we're so much more sane than we were in the 1950s. I don't really think that's true. Maybe they shipped all those people to the State Department and that's where they are. I don't know. But
well, there's also a lot more people in our society too. So
right.
The population has grown tremendously, especially in New York.
It's not to say there weren't advances in medical science, like people might need to be in the hospital fewer days for surgery because they developed laparoscopic surgery, or they developed certain medications that make it possible for people to function who couldn't before. But you have to say, is there actually an idea that the value of your society is in the human beings and what they can contribute? And then how do you get legislation that flows from that as your axiomatic principle, as opposed to just saying punishment and revenge, which really is not justice, because you would think of justice as something that allows the person to become a better person.
So are you recommending like community service instead of maybe like maybe imprisonment?
It depends. It totally depends on the nature of the crime. But not only service, who's going to work with these people to give them an insight? I mean, many of the people who end up in this mess were people who themselves were abused, who were traumatized. So how do you break that?
Barbara Gaskins actually does. She's a candidate running in North Carolina as well. She actually does work with reentry programs. Linwood, do you have anything that you want to say about that?
Yes. First, we really have to be careful, in my opinion, with generally just trying to identify criminal behavior. Because a lot of times when we get into that, we get into stereotypes with one another. And which we know with the criminal justice system, we're overly prosecuting one group and under minimizing the behavior from another group. I know in 2020, a good example, and just some racial breakdown, whites committed over 4 million crimes in 2020. Well, blacks committed over 1 million crimes. The violence rates and gun rates is about equal and the same. But that's not what we often believe about one another. And one of the reasons that our communities is being heavily policed. But still yet, although whites committed 4 times more crimes, blacks make up 5 times more in the prison system. So even when a white criminal goes to court, he still isn't looked at or viewed at as a threat, and is often let off on charges. When blacks, on the other hand, with some very minimal charges, is being sentenced to some very long term. The current situation we got going on in politics. I'm sorry, sir.
I got a quick question for you. Actually, there's a proposal. Actually, earlier I said it might be controversial. We look at the statistics and they say blacks get 20% longer sentences than whites. What happens if we just said 20% across system-wide, if we just knocked 20% off the sentences of black people? Do you think that would be a systemic solution for a systemic problem?
Oh, that's a very good question. But I mean, legally, how do you do that? I would take the laws to correct some of the problems we are having within the law, particularly around sentencing and things like that. And that's the only way I see that we can do it. But exactly how that will be done, that's a great idea, though.
Okay, Randy doesn't like it. Randy, why don't you like it, man? Randy, what's the problem?
It's not that I don't like it. It's just unrealistic. So
why is it unrealistic? I am letting him answer.
My bad.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem here. So one thing that a lot of people choose to ignore is the population disparity among the races. So you have 67% whites, you have 13% blacks, and then we also see that 13% of the blacks commit as equal to the number of crimes that whites are committing. So we have to look at the dichotomy there as to why. Sure, we can blame it on social systemic issues such as wealth, income gaps, opportunities, whatever the case may be there. But when we say, okay, black people are the ones who's committing all these crimes and they're getting the longer jail sentences. So to balance it out, let's take off, 20% of the crimes. Well, we can't do that because guess what? We're creating recidivism again, all over again. We're putting these same people right back on the street without actually creating any solution or mitigating the problems that they got put in jail in the first place with.
I think that's a fair take. I appreciate that. Now, let me propose something else that's more relevant towards Mr. Gaskin actually himself. Big shout out to my man Nolan Farrell, who's actually incarcerated 10 years. He's innocent. He still hasn't been vindicated for his innocence. And big shout out to Vincent Godo, right?
Because they don't want to pay the money.
He's from Pennsylvania. He's actually the first guy to be exonerated of charges. So the thing is that it's ridiculous. These people, right? There's evidence of their innocence, right? There's evidence of their innocence. It should only take, if there's evidence, right? It shouldn't go back to trial. They should just file one paperwork, one business day. That person should be freed. Yeah. What do you guys think about that?
You shouldn't have to do that. Shouldn't have to do that much.
If they have the proof, they should just be able to file a form and get out.
Yeah, absolutely.
The minimum. What do Linwood, what do you think about that?
That is absolutely necessary. Yes. Yeah. Being there, I mean, I remember the standing about 8 steps from the execution chamber and thinking at the moment, how many people died on that bed that were innocent. It's too easy to go to prison for something you didn't do. And Americans need to stop thinking that we are separated from this issue. It can happen to any one of us. I don't care where you are. I mean, I was pulled out of my home. I'm pulled out of my home. So don't give me this mess about staying away from the wrong people, being quiet. If you are a loner, I'm going to tell you, because I'm a natural loner, and this is one of the things that hurt me. You have no alibi anywhere you go in America that will prove that you are not involved in a crime just by being a natural loner.
Can I add?
It can happen.
I agree there.
Yeah, it can happen to anyone. And I'd like to add just anecdotally, when I have a twin brother, and when we were in high school, he was doing a ride along with the police department. And he happened to be in the car, and my mom was somewhere stopped talking to someone, and it came over the scanner, her vehicle information, and that she was being suspected of a drug deal. And anyone who knows my mother, or who would have known her before she passed, was like, that was laughable. And my brother just happened to be in the car, and he was like, hey man, that's my mama. And the officer was like, what? And, but had he not have been there, right, there would have been a whole thing with her being stopped. And so when we talk about how it can happen, and there are a couple of issues as I hear us talking, and one of the things we're talking about is lack of real rehabilitation in prisons, right? We know, I hope we know that our prison system in the United States doesn't actually rehabilitate people in the way that it claims to rehabilitate folks who are incarcerated. And so I think if we're looking at proposals, it would mean really working the system so that people are rehabilitated, so that after they come out of prison and have done their time, have successfully completed their probation, right, that they're able, and some states have already taken this measure where they're able to get jobs. And, so we don't equip people to go back into the workforce. And something I saw over and over again when I was a law enforcement officer is folks who, I'd pick them up and they had committed a crime 20 years ago, right? I had a guy stop me one time and ask me to arrest him so that he could go back to jail because he couldn't get a job and it was winter and he didn't have a place to sleep and the shelters were full, right? And so
I've met people like that too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And until we're honest
People do that
about
to rehabs too. They go to rehab.
exactly, yep,
Yeah.
until we're honest about what the system isn't doing, we're not going to be able to fix this. But we have to be honest about what it's not doing.
Absolutely,
Then,
Michelle. I 100% agree with you there,
1,000%
because that's
agree.
the conversation that we need to have. This
right.
we're looking at the privatization of the prison system and how they are not rehabilitating the prisoners. You say you want them off the streets, you want them to rehabilitate it, but what does that look like?
Right.
What are you doing to rehabilitate them? And it goes the conversation is silent at that point.
Right.
It's like, well, we're just removing them from society because they're an issue. Well, why are they an issue? Let's address the mental health aspect of that. Let's look at the educational aspect. So these are things that we have to have conversations about and actually address those issues. And no one's willing to have those conversations because the reality is this, and it's the bottom line. It takes too much work, and we don't like to work.
So do we all have an agreement here to decouple the profit system from the prison industry?
No, it wasn't
No,
the
I
same,
think what
actually.
we have is
sounds like
a way to take somebody from prison and put them back into the work world, back into society. So some sort of an apprenticeship program perhaps would be good to get them out, to get them into a community where they can slowly develop their skills again and get back into the work world.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem that I have with that. Okay, Michelle and Randy and Susan. Okay.
And I actually didn't finish what I was saying. So
I know you didn't. I know you
yeah.
didn't. And I want you to go back because I want to hear what you have to say. I thought it was very cogent. We're snatching people. Okay, they've done something that we labeled bad, and we've snatched them out of their life. If they are a parent, if they have an apartment, if they have a job, all of those things now go away. Their kids go away, their apartment, all the things in their apartment, their clothes. It's like, if they don't have someone to come in and clear out their apartment and do that, they've lost everything. And then you put them in this place where they're supposedly supposed to be rehabilitated, and then you come out and you dump them on the street with nothing. And that's reality. That is what happens right now.
Oh yeah, and I'm not advocating for that.
All of their stuff again, all their clothes, all their furniture, their kids back, their jobs. This is what I'm saying.
So the other thing,
we can prevent that from happening. That soul destroying, society destroying.
Michelle works with those communities. She's got good references.
Yeah, and so the other thing, right, is we've got to find a better way for addressing nonviolent offenders. Right, because nonviolent offenders often end up in prison, and we know that. And people who haven't committed any crimes, Khalif Browder was a really good example of this in New York, right, Diane? And so nonviolent offenders I don't believe, should be just warehoused by the system, and so there's got to be, but there's also the issue that we don't talk about, collective we, right, as a society. Is charge stacking of charges, right? And so what law enforcement will do is law enforcement will say, okay, well, I stopped this person. The judge is probably going to reduce the charges. So how many charges can I put on this person to make sure that they get what the law enforcement officer thinks is a reasonable sentence?
Are you
right.
Are you talking about enhancements?
I'm just talking about charge. I'm talking about just charge stacking.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why I talk about comprehensive criminal justice reform, because one of these things can't be done without the other. And then there's the mental health piece, because if last time I checked, the prison system was the largest provider of mental health care resources. And so I did probably, sometimes in the summertime, I would do 5 or 6 involuntary committals a day, because I could see that people were mentally ill off their medication, and I could take them and check them in to the psychiatric hospital, right? So they could get their medication readjusted. But it takes law enforcement officers being trained in alternative methods of policing so that they can actually do this in communities. So.
Hey, I have one more question from my man Linwood. A lot of the reforms that are suggested are prison reforms to take care of people who are in prison because they get treated so bad. One of them is like to have a maximum 3-month period of solitary confinement. Some people would say no solitary confinement. How do you feel about that particular issue of solitary confinement? And like using our platform to try to address that issue?
The prison system
Yeah, go ahead.
continue to change depending on who's controlling the legislation. I have noticed that. When Democrats are in office, they do a little bit more towards reform. When Republicans are in office, Republicans want to govern the prison system in the old-fashioned way of penal code. And that's when you see the use of a lot more of solitary confinement, longer stays in solitary confinement, and things like that. Is they more on punishment. 23 hours locked down for just about many jails now and so-called correctional facilities throughout the state of North Carolina I've seen. It's terrible. That's going to break a person down anyway. That has never worked. It's already been proven not to work. It's already been shown legally to be inhumane treatment.
So
you will make a worse person
So
when they
you're
get out of
completely
prison.
against it, like, because I know some people, like what's his name, Larry, from he's got a popular after prison show. He actually says that there should be some. He's actually for some limited use of solitary confinement.
Some limited use, yeah, but long-term use, no.
So
And-
really, I think you guys could
and
agree
I
on,
think they
right?
really-
I don't think it's right for years. I think it's ridiculous. Like, maybe 3 months. What do you think a 3-month maximum would be fair? Do you think that's something we could all agree on? 3-month max solitary confinement.
3 months
Not
in
quite. Or you think it's
isolation,
too
a
long?
person is completely broken.
You want to make
That's
it 1 month?
Yeah,
insane.
that's too long. 3 months in isolation, they broke.
Well, you give me 1 month.
That's
They're never
insane.
gonna-
3 months.
Want to make it 1 month?
Yeah,
I would say
yeah.
24
What?
years.
20
That's
days?
low.
I would say that would be subjective to the person, to the individual. Depending on their behavior in the prison, depending on their behavior, why they got into prison, will probably should be the driving factor as to how much solitary confinement that person should receive, and whether or not
That could be
after
unlimited. That could be
yeah
unlimited.
after
Wait a
a
minute.
short period
Do we have
after
a maximum?
maybe
Ask a question. What is the
What's the
do
absolute
people
maximum?
benefit
Who's
from
making this
solitary
decision?
confinement?
Who's
I mean,
doing
what
the
is
evaluating?
benefit? What's the ostensible benefit of doing it? That's what I'm trying
Maybe
to
we end it?
understand. Why
You guys want
There
to
is
end
no
it?
benefit.
has anyone
A
ever
mental
benefited
break.
from it?
It's a mental break of the person. It's a mental break of the person at the end of the day. That is the intent of solitary confinement, is to mentally break that person from their habits. And so when you lock somebody up and you say, okay, they're gonna be in
No,
solitary
you are
confinement for 1 week.
breaking them from mental stability. You will
sorry?
break their mental stability. You are
Yes.
going to. You're not going to break a pattern. You're going to break a mental stability. It is going to drive.
Right.
Even if they're insane when they went in, they will be insane when they come out.
Right.
You're
And
going
that's
to
why
make a more aggressive criminal and individual after that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's
They
why
have laws.
I said it would be subjective. So depending on the person, you could put them in for a week and they have gone loony. So you take them out and you have that conversation with them, get them the mental help that they need to get them back on track, and say, do you understand why you went in there? And you start doing corrective steps to help them understand that, hey, if you continue this kind of behavior, you're going to go back in there and it's going to be worse. And that person's going to probably take pause and say, you know what, I'm not going to do this behavior anymore because that sucked. And that's what we fail to do with the prison system, with the solitary confinement aspect of it, is we don't mitigate, after we break them, we don't mitigate, helping them.
So would you be willing to put a maximum on it? Would you be willing to put a time period maximum?
Like I said, yes and no. That's what I said. It's subjective to the individual.
What maximum would you agree to? Like just
I'll
overall?
probably say a month.
month?
Max.
Okay, good.
A match. Because you could take some military guys and they're used to being in a solitary confinement state of mind.
It sounds like the
I did
majority-
6 years in the Army, and that is not true.
That's-
No, solitary confinement is still torture.
It sounds like the majority may be able to pass no solitary confinement, so we'll see if that passes as well. I'll put that in the proposal list as well. But we'll also have a month as well, and either way, we should be able to get something definitive about limiting this horrible procedure, which I'm
Correct.
glad to see here today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one is just,
I just want to say that to me, it seems like we have these people who've gone through some trauma, and what we're saying to them is, you know what? You haven't gotten enough abuse. If we just give you a little bit more abuse, you'll straighten right up.
Yeah, they do that
And
all the time
that's
to some of us out here.
that's not going to happen. When has
And
it
that
ever
brings us
happened?
to-
When has that ever happened? It's not happening
How
now.
many y'all ain't going through it right now as activists? How
Well,
many y'all ain't going through
well,
this?
you know, if you look at history,
that dumb.
just because a person has a mental issue and they go out and they commit crimes against society, they often not even afforded that opportunity, you know, for corrective behavior. They're immediately shot, hung, or, you know, otherwise stoned to death. You know, so, you know, we have to look at what the alternatives are versus what's available today.
Go ahead,
Well, we
Susan.
have
Go
a
ahead, Susan.
constitution, don't we?
Susan had a hand raised. Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Laws.
for me, the next part of it is, you know, with a parent staying at home, that will help a great deal. But then the other part is we have to stop young people from going into the juvenile detention part of it too, because once they get into there, then they, you know, it just spirals out of control. And so the biggest problem I've noticed is that the people who end up in the prison system, who end up in juvie first, are ones who are not fitting into the educational system we have currently, which is keep book learning as long as possible, and then you're supposed to go to university. And that just doesn't work for everybody. So we need to change that. We need to utilize our apprenticeship program earlier and more for 80% probably of the students going through the system, because most kids need to start moving and getting out when they're about 14, and we're trapping them into a classroom, and then they feel trapped, they can't concentrate, you know, there might be problems at home, they can't do their homework, and then their grades drop and they just spiral out of control, and then they end up in you know, juvie and then eventually in prison.
There's
So
a
we need
reason they
to
call it the
focus on
school
the
to prison
apprenticeship
pipeline.
program. Sorry?
There's a reason they call it the school to prison pipeline.
Exactly.
So,
And I
Susan,
think
need
we have
stop
to
that.
Susan,
we have to recognize that the school to prison pipeline starts with kids as young as kindergarten, right? And so what we know is that kids as young as kindergarten are expelled when it's Black and brown kids are expelled at higher rates than other kids are. And I mean,
just
as a
quick thing before we
Yeah.
go off into that tangent, we'll right back to you. But Susan, I
Mhm.
just put that onto the proposal list. So I said introduce
Okay.
apprenticeship program for inmates and for students for apprenticeship for the inmates. That's one thing, and the other one is to give an apprenticeship program for students to give them another path to success. So that's on the
Exactly.
proposal, and I gave you credit for it. Now we're going to hear Michelle. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make
Right.
sure that people know, and I want you all to make proposals as well. Right? There's other proposals on there. I want you to be part of this. Okay? Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
Yeah, and so as we talk about the need to make sure young people have opportunities, what I can tell you is that the young people that I encountered in law enforcement who were breaking the law, some of these were kids from wealthy, affluent homes. Very rarely were they kids from less affluent homes and neighborhoods, right? But I personally made the decision to call parents first, right? If it was someone who was living at home, I called parents first and gave parents first right to discipline. And so we've got to begin looking at how we address juvenile offenders, right? And so they're not getting caught up in the system. And so, but some of this is communal, right? There's a certain amount of work that should be the responsibility of communities.
Mhm.
And like, what are communities and organizations and nonprofits that are doing some of this work and connecting those? And so, because I think sometimes we put an unnecessary burden on the government to do some things that we should be taking care of in our communities. And if we are appropriately training law enforcement to do some of this work, then law enforcement can be connecting these kids and these families to organizations in their communities that are there to help them get on the right path.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. One of the big things when I was running for sheriff of Arapahoe County in 2018, and I got a lot of pushback for this, but I stood by this platform, was we need to readdress our quote unquote zero tolerance policies in schools. Because when I was going to elementary school in the 90s, the stuff that I would get sent to the principal office for, kids get arrested for today. I'm not talking like strongly disciplined, I mean police officer goes into the classroom, puts handcuffs on them, and sends them off to jail. And these are like 8, 9-year-old kids. I mean, I get it. Fighting in school is bad, but at the same token, you can't be arresting 8 or 9-year-olds. You are setting them up for so much failure when you do that. And I was the only sheriff candidate saying, get the police out of the schools. We can have private security and we can have police officers nearby to respond to a active shooter type situation. But the idea of having to go in and arrest 8-year-olds for the stuff that when we were growing up, we just got detention or went to the principal's office for, I found absolutely horrifying.
That was, that's real deep, man. There's actually a couple other issues that I think are real deep also that I want to attest to. Maybe we could, what do you guys feel about like ending the death penalty?
Ooh, I love it.
Are there any opposition to that? Randy don't like it? Okay.
Decrease it.
Decrease it? Okay, decrease, okay.
Increase.
Increase the death penalty? Increase the number of deaths? Wow.
Yes.
Wow, oh my, damn. All right, well, hey, be honest about it, man. We'll see if that passes, but hey, man, at least you're real with it, all right? Okay, damn. How about this
I could probably speak to why we shouldn't do that for at least the state of Colorado, because where we live at in Colorado, the overwhelming majority of our state opposed the death penalty. And the problem is that in my neck of the woods, Judicial District 18, the district attorney, who was very much using his position to climb the political ladder in Colorado, he was fully aware of the lack of support for the death penalty, fully aware of the fact that most Coloradans didn't go for it. He had the Aurora Theater shooter, James Holmes, in custody. He was ready to plead guilty and go to prison for life. But this district attorney, who was more interested in climbing the ladder than serving justice, he went ahead and pursued a death penalty that he knew wasn't going to get a conviction, but he did it anyways. And that cost the state $5.5 million. So we spent $5.5 million to convict somebody who was already going to get convicted because the attorney general knew the death penalty wasn't going to pass here, but he went for it anyways because he wanted a feather in his cap for when he was running for higher offices, which he's done horribly on, and he's now no longer in politics. So it's really important that when we're talking about the death penalty, we realize that a lot of attorney generals who are going for it, they know full well that in some communities that's not going to fly, but they're just going to pursue it anyways, and they don't care how much it costs the taxpayers in litigation.
That's a great point, but you know, honestly, we all have our own reasons for supporting or being against it, right? Personal. So, but really, we're just here to see what we can agree on. Right.
If I may.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, when we look at you know, the apparatus of criminal activity. You apprehend a person that's caught red-handed committing mass murder. You know, they're on a shooting spree, and they get life in prison, or they're sentenced to a death penalty. That should not be prolonged. They should be taken out just like that, and be done and done and over with. That way, it doesn't cost the state money. You know, 33 cents or, you know, quick shot and we move on.
Problem with that,
that's the way it should be done.
We've got someone on this panel right now who was wrongfully convicted.
Right.
People
exactly.
have rights.
Due process.
Just put a guillotine in the
corner. It is due process. They would have due process.
So you're presuming the justice system would have to be flawless. Yeah. And there's so
the
much.
The person is captured.
But
they're actually committed. They actually committed the crime, and they're, you know, caught red-handed.
Okay.
You know, the due process is simple.
Hey,
they committed the crime, and they're done.
In this country, that does not have some political motivation one way or the other.
I see no political motivation behind that whatsoever.
Wow. Aren't you afraid of giving that much power to the state? The power over your...
No, that's actually power to the people.
This is the kind of the libertarian part of me that's saying you're giving a lot of power to the state.
He's a bubblegum picking ass type. Yeah.
What happens when?
No, that's power. That's giving power to the people. Actually,
look, I had the closest person in my life was murdered. The closest person in my life was murdered. And when I was there with the DA, going into the DA, looking through the records, I saw things in that record that they did not share with the defense.
What up?
And even though I wanted this person convicted, okay, I saw it and I thought, how are they getting away with this?
Okay. So look, there's going to be people who disagree on this particular topic, right? Not that I know my position on this one, but what about ending cash bail? We know that the system, right, it creates a system where rich people get off, right? You don't have to stay in jail. Poor people do, and they can't really, like, if you're out, right, it helps you find legal help, things like that. Are anybody against ending cash bail? Or go ahead, Eric, please. Yeah.
I'd like to chime into this because this was an issue when I was running for sheriff in 2018. I think that getting rid of cash bail entirely sounds great in theory, but one issue we've seen in the state of New Jersey and possibly in the state of New York and in California is that when they switch to these automated systems, people who would normally qualify for like nominally low sums of cash bail don't get it at all. We've seen automated systems screw people over in that regard. So I would say we definitely need bail reform because in a lot of places it is way too high. And one big thing that I'd like to see, and one thing that we passed in Colorado at the state level, and what I'd like to see happen at the federal level, is you get a lot of instances where people can afford the bail proper, but then they get screwed on the processing fee. Like the correctional system will tack on a processing fee. So it's like, sure, you paid the $50 bail, but because you couldn't pay the processing fee of the additional $20 the state charged on top of that, you have to rot in jail. And part of me is like, I'm glad that at least in the state of Colorado, and something I want to see happen at the federal level, is get rid of those processing charges, or at least don't revoke somebody's bail because they can't afford the processing charge. Get the processing charge later for them, but don't deny their bail because they paid the bail. They just can't pay the processing fee.
Okay, so wait a second. So I'm trying to put this on the proposals form. Would you say get rid of bail processing charges? Would that be the proposal?
That would be something I'd like to see, or at least don't revoke bail because they can't afford the processing fee.
Okay.
I have two things. One is in our Constitution already, but I think we should reassert the principle of innocent until proven guilty. That doesn't exist. Someone has to stand for that. Innocent until proven guilty. And then this is something totally else. I actually think in our prisons there should be major, besides apprenticeship programs, what really wouldn't cost much, excepting perhaps you could find situations where safety could be ensured, but there should be cultural programs. There should be choruses. There should be drama teams. I've seen various projects with Shakespeare brought in, and it had a hugely profound. I think things in music and drama give people some of the tools they need to get a reflection on their own thought processes and how they came to find themselves in that situation, and would give people also tools to be able to deal with things when they come out. Because really, you would want people to be better when they leave the prison than when they went in, but what we see is people are worse when they leave than when they went in.
Okay, so I added that as increased prison art programs. Diane's there. Is that the proposal?
Yes, I would say a full symphony orchestra, but I think the instruments might be used for dangerous things, so we'll have to stick with singing.
Okay. Right, art/music programs. Okay, that's a good one.
I had a friend, by the way, who was, this is on this justice system because people may know what happened to LaRouche, but, and he spent 5 years in a federal prison, and a group of our fundraisers were given very long jail sentences. One of my colleagues was given a 77-year prison sentence unless he would plead guilty to taking a political loan and not having a stockbroker's license.
Yeah, Linwood, I'm sorry, man. I'm gonna make
imagine that. So he refused to plead guilty. So his own lawyer decided that he was mentally insane and had him undergo a psychiatric evaluation. He ended up spending 11 years in prison. When he was there, he organized a chorus, and they sang the Prisoner's Chorus from Beethoven's Fidelio, and it had an extremely profound impact on the men who were there.
Yeah, we imprison more people than anywhere in the world, actually. And some of the last reforms that are really on the list here are pardoning, Snowden, Assange, Jamal, Leonard Peltier, and other political prisoners. Are there any struggles against that? No, right? Also, there's getting rid of predatory pricing at prison commissaries, and also giving prisoners the ability to make free phone calls. It's
Yeah.
VoIP time, right? There's no need for them to be paying per minute per
Right.
call with coins. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Right.
Also, what about this one? Giving prisoners the right to see doctors upon request from outside the prison system. We know that a lot of time, prisoners complain of receiving substandard care. They complain of starvation while they're in solitary. If they could maybe see a professional outside the prison system.
That happens sometimes. Something that they're doing in California, because they throw everybody into jail here, is that the prisons were so overcrowded that they started pushing them to the county jails. And so the county jails had people who were supposed to go to prison, but there wasn't any room. So if you have like a lower security level or done something, nonviolent, low security level, they would push you to the county jails. But the people in the county jails don't have the services that they do in the prisons. So in the prisons, you can go to the law library. In the prisons, you can partake in all these different programs, but you can't do that in the county jails because they're not set up for that. So you have people in there for sometimes in county jail, like 11 years. This one woman that I heard of, 11 years.
So, yeah, that's a great, actually. I think this is a good place for us to maybe wrap up if there's not anything else really that people want to bring to the table. But before we go, I want to give you guys a chance to talk about yourselves one more time. Maybe you guys are involved with activism on this particular regard, or you guys want to contact any of the panelists to say a little bit more. So if you guys could share, right, your website, your email, right, whatever you want to share, right, how people can contact you, stuff like that, and so that they could stay involved in this particular conversation. If there's activist candidates who want to talk about this issue further, there's one more week, right, while you guys can make proposals on this particular topic. Next week, we're going to have the one on the wealth gap, right? The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I really think that hopefully this will springboard us to the next panel
How
discussion.
about we jail everyone who makes over $2 billion a year?
Yeah, that's hilarious.
We need to legalize drugs.
So let's start off.
We need to legalize drugs.
Fill you on that, yeah? Well, I'll put that on the proposal too, yeah? So let's start with Eric Mulder. If you could share your information right quick.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, for having me on this panel today. This was a great and spirited discussion, as I was promised, and that was delivered. My contact information is MULDER for Colorado, MULDER FORCO. That's mulderforco.com. That's my website. mulderforco@gmail.com if you would like to email me. Big reason, again, I'm running for U.S. Congress is because I've supported criminal justice reform at the local level running for sheriff. I've supported initiatives in Colorado that have seen psilocybin decriminalized in Denver. We saw the Arapahoe County Jail not expand because the people banded with criminal justice coalitions to make sure we weren't throwing more people in jail. And most important of all, we got slavery out of our state constitution. We took it out as punishment for a crime. It's still in the federal constitution under the 13th Amendment. That is the big thing I want to change in the U.S. House of Representatives is I want to amend the 13th Amendment to take out slavery as punishment for a crime. It is time to end prison slavery. It is time to cut the gravy train off from the prison industrial complex so that way we can have real justice. Thank you so much. mulderforco.com. And I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MULDERFORCO as well.
Okay, just so you know, for the rest of the panel, you guys can actually visit this link later. Put your in the comments, put all this stuff right there. But yeah, thank you for once again. Who knows, right? I know people will be restreaming this. They might not be able to capture all that information, so we'll see. All right, so go ahead. I believe you are next, Miss Michelle Lewis.
Hi, thank you so much for putting this together. And folks that want to reach me further can do that at michellelewisforsenate.com spelled out FOR. And I'll put it in the box as well. You can email me at info@michellelewisforsenate.com. And I'm a part of this race in this conversation because, as I said earlier, comprehensive criminal justice reform is really important to me. I believe we need to have a system for making sure those folks who are doing the wrong thing are actually pulled out. But we also need to celebrate the law enforcement officers who are doing the right thing in communities, because there are law enforcement officers who are trying to do the right thing and who feel like their hands are tied. And so we need to make sure that we have a system that works for all of us, which we currently don't. We don't have a system that works for all people, and it's important that we really get to the place where we have a system that that communities can feel confident in. That if you need to call the police, the police are going to show up, and that they're going to do the right thing. And sadly, that's not where we're at right now. Kind of across the country, there's reduced confidence in law enforcement, and for some communities, it's always been that way. And so, how do we make sure that for communities who felt like that's always been the case in their community, that we really work to right those systemic wrongs that have been present in those communities? So, thank you again for doing this today, and it was great to be in conversation with you all.
Of course. Linwood, my brother, you want to say a little something? Any last words?
Yes, last words. First things first, everyone, please vote for Michelle for North Carolina Senate, as well as Ms. Barbara Gaskins for the House Representative 3 seat. Again, I'm Linwood Gallup, and I'm running for the County Commissioner seat here in Pasquotank County in Elizabeth City. My contact, you can contact me through email at my name, LINWOODGALLOP. That's at gmail.com. Thank you. This was a great show, guys. Thank you. Good panel. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Susan, you're next.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm Susan Buxer-Lahaki, and I'm running for West Virginia's House of Representative seat, 2nd District. And I'm for making drugs legal so that we can get some of these frivolous laws out of the system and we don't incarcerate so many people. There is also a whole bunch of other laws that need to be taken off the books. Less incarceration is what I would like to do if I'm elected. So let's see what we can get done. But I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a wonderful panel, and thank you so much for organizing everything.
Yeah, I'm green myself, so I'm a bit, interesting mix, right? Green Republican, yeah, new breed right there.
Christmas
That's
Republican,
cool.
that's
Christmas
right.
Republicans, why not, right? Okay, let's Randy, go ahead, my brother.
And first off, thank you all for the lovely discussion today. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you for putting this together, Ed. Tremendous work. And so everyone can find me at rperm for US, the number 4 US. I was lazy, but for us, rperm4us at .com, rperm4us.com, and that's my campaign website. And I'm on all social media platforms at rperm, RPURHAM. And running for the United States House of Representatives for the great state of Alaska at large. And once again, thank you. I had a great time today, and I appreciate everyone's work in doing what you're doing.
All right,
and good luck to everyone in your races.
Diane Sayre definitely featured. She's in a high-profile race against Schumer. I'm a big fan. Once again, she's been on the right side of the issue so many times. I've seen her on the ground. Sometimes as candidates, we take slings and arrows, and I've seen her take them, and she keeps coming back for more. Diane Sayre, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, I'm really glad to have been here. I actually hope people contact me, and I'm going to give you my campaign phone number, which is 646-328-1932, which I picked because that's the year Franklin Roosevelt got elected. And my email address is diane@Sayre, F-O-R, Senate.com, and I believe that a great deal of our ills come from the economic policy, and I guess we'll take that up next time, but the fact that we seem to bail out Wall Street speculators endlessly, but there is no regard for the standard of living or the value of human beings or what people can create. And contrary to perhaps most of you, I guess I would say I support drug decriminalization, but not legalization, and not pot dispensaries all over the place. I think it's a complete disaster we're going to have to, if we're going to have a real economy, then people have to have a mind, and there is no value placed on human minds these days. So we'll take that up, but I'd really like to hear from everyone, because I think I can learn a lot from all of you.
Awesome. My co-host Lisa, oh my goodness, go ahead.
Just to say that dispensaries are so ubiquitous here in California. They're like 7-Elevens. They're everywhere. And it's no big deal here. We've had it for years. So, but at any rate, I'm with COC, and for those who are interested, Color of Change is doing a lot. I'm not officially here in a Color of Change capacity, but I am a member of the Los Angeles team, the Southern California squad. We've done some good work here, and the best thing about us is that we're winners. We win our races, even the tough ones. So we're a force to be reckoned with, and I'm doing a bunch of stuff with them, including trying to get a tech team together where we support our own businesses and hold tech websites and stuff, and basically become an incubator for people. So, but I'm also starting a online educational platform called Hyperion Academics, and that is basically to help parents who wish to homeschool. And there are some people who don't know this, but homeschooling has exploded among the Black community. Homeschooling has gone up to about 16%. And there's a reason for that. And a lot of it is because of the things that we discussed right here, that, parents are tired of their kids being sent to the office because they tap their foot. And so a little kid wiggling is what little kids do. 5-year-olds being sent to the principal. It's like, you're absolutely right, Eric and Michelle. So, So I'm here to kind of help those communities and to create these sort of lateral communities and infrastructures that don't necessarily have to rely on traditional schools, traditional networks, traditional VC when you want to start your own business.
Lisa's great. Honestly, she came with the idea to hang the signs off the project buildings. That's actually Diane Sayre knows about my work doing that, right? It's like the impact of a billboard. Worth thousands of dollars. It's so just props to Lisa so much. Next week is going to be our talk on the gap, the gap between the rich and the poor, and how candidates are going to address that situation. I think that's a real hot topic. I want you guys all to tune in next week. I want to thank everybody for coming by. I think this was incredible. Yeah? Thanks again. That's it.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
Thanks.
Bye.
So, bye.
Thank you.
All right, so I just hit stop recording. That's the show. All right, thanks again, folks. Anything else?
That was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing a couple more, because I think I signed up for a few more down the road.
Yeah, tomorrow, my man, there's a guy who was, Carmen Canones finally entered. Oh my God. She missed the whole thing.
Oh no.
Do you know Carmen Canones actually, she's actually a housing, public housing has 800,000 residents in New York City alone. That could be a powerful capture for your race. Yeah? Oh my goodness, Carmen. Carmen, can you hear me? Carmen, what's up?
Just came in, man. It just flew in.
I'm a big fan of Carmen. Yeah, we just finished our online criminal justice reform panel. These are candidates
so
running
sorry.
from Alaska to Colorado to West Virginia to North Carolina.
Awesome. Sorry I missed it, man, but I just got
It's
here.
all good. It's all good. All right, so I'm about to end the call, but it's great to see you, Carmen. Maybe next week we're doing the wealth gap. We do have a public housing forum coming up, National Symposium. You guys should contact people in your area, right? Carmen Canones is actually attending associate person for Douglas Houses. She ran for city council. She was a Democratic chair or something. She's very qualified and politically just very knowledgeable. And if we could get like the political, there's so many changes that she could tell you guys about. That the public housing, you could capture that audience and bring them to your campaigns in 2022.
And where can people find the link to this?
I actually have some videos of this one on DGL7, the YouTube channel. Just go to and then I also have the interview with Carmen that you should watch. That's actually quite good. I have a public housing section, And yeah,
Yeah, really good.
she did Occupy Night Show, all this crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah,
Hi guys, how y'all doing?
I'm doing
Good.
good.
Hey.
I'm doing good. Yeah.
Hey, I just got in from Georgia. I'm so sorry I
Don't
missed
worry
it
about
though.
it. We're doing it next week
Next
again.
one, baby. Next one.
We got public housing one coming up. We got another one on reparations. I don't know if that's going to go down or not. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know if you guys.
You got it then.
One thing we talked about today was, right, if black people get 20% longer sentences, maybe we just chop 20% off of all black people's prison sentences. That could be a form of taking care of the issue now, right now. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, so I'll catch y'all later then.
Hell yeah! All right. Good to
Yeah.
see you.
Ciao,
Okay.
baby.
All right. Peace.
Hi, everybody.
Wow. Wow.